Alex's point of view.
The bond had gone silent. 1 second, Liyah's terror was a deafening scream in my head, her plea for us to go back vibrating through my very bones. The next, nothing. A dead, sickening static. My wolf roared in protest, a primal sound of fury that ripped from my throat as I tore through the underbrush. Beside me, Adrian was a blur of midnight blue fur, his own snarl echoing mine. He was running on pure, unadulterated rage, his wolf larger and more savage than I'd ever seen it. We hit the perimeter line of Dante's packlands together. It was a solid wall of scent marks, dozens of shifters, all radiating hostility. A challenge. Good, I didn't want to talk. A patrol of 5 wolves burst from the tree line, shifting midair to block our path. They were big, ugly brutes, their fur bristling with aggression. "You are trespassing on Alpha Mike's." The lead wolf started to shift back into human form to speak. He never finished the sentence. Adrian hit him like a freight train. He didn't even bother slowing down. He slammed into the shifter before he was fully human. A crunch of bone that made my own teeth ache. The man went flying backward into a tree and dropped like a stone. The remaining 4 hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all we needed. I lunged at the nearest one, my jaws snapping for his throat. He yelped and scrambled back, but I was faster. I slammed my shoulder into his flank, knocking him off balance, and drove him into the dirt. Adrian was a whirlwind of teeth and claws. He wasn't fighting like a civilized alpha. He was fighting like a rogue, like an animal backed into a corner. He tore through 2 wolves in seconds, leaving them whimpering and bleeding in the dirt. The last wolf turned tail and fled back towards the center of their territory, howling the alarm. Let them come. Let every single one of them come. Liyah, where are you? I pushed the thought out, straining against the silence in my head. Why had she shut us out? What had she meant about her family? The panic in her mental voice had been genuine, terrifyingly so. "They have her," Adrian snarled, his voice a guttural growl even in human speech as we pounded toward the distant lights of the compound. I can smell her fear on the wind, and something else. Something metallic. Blood. I spat, the scent hitting me now, underneath the reek of too many unfamiliar wolves. And sickness. A lot of sickness. We crested a ridge and saw it, a sprawling compound built into the side of a craggy mountain. A large fortress-like house stood at the entrance to what looked like a massive cave system. The alarm howls were constant now, pouring out of the mountain like smoke. Dozens of wolves were pouring out of the cave mouth, forming a defensive line in front of the house. Among them stood a massive grizzled gray wolf, Alpha Mike, and a sleek, russet-colored one that I knew had to be Dante. "Kill them!" Alpha Mike's roar echoed across the clearing. "No one enters!" Adrian didn't hesitate. He launched himself down the slope, a missile aimed straight at the center of their line. "Adrian, wait!" I yelled. But it was useless. He was gone to the rage. I cursed under my breath and charged after him. We were outnumbered, at least 20 to 1. But it didn't matter. My mate was in there. We hit their line with the force of an avalanche. Adrian crashed directly into Dante, the 2 of them tumbling in a snapping, snarling ball of fur. I found myself surrounded by 4 wolves, their jaws snapping at my legs and flanks. I fought with cold, calculated fury. I used my size, my weight, throwing them off, crushing limbs, tearing flesh. But for every one I put down, 2 more seemed to take their place. Then I heard it, above the chaos, above the howls. Dante's voice booming from his human form as he momentarily threw Adrian off. "Close the territory! Seal every exit! Find her! No one takes her!" Find her. She wasn't in the caves. She had escaped. Or someone had taken her. "Adrian," I bellowed, mental and physical voice combined. "She's not in there. She's gone." Adrian froze for a split second, his head snapping toward me. His snout was matted with blood that wasn't his own. The distraction cost him. Dante lunged, his teeth sinking into Adrian's shoulder. Adrian roared in pain and fury, shaking Dante off and slamming him into the rocky ground before backing away toward me. We stood back to back, a circle of snapping wolves closing in around us. "Where?" Adrian demanded, his chest heaving. I don't know, I growled, scanning the tree line, the mountain, desperate for any sign, any scent. The bond was still a dead zone. But they're searching for her, which means she's out of their reach for now. We have to go, I said, shouldering a wolf that tried to flank me. We need to find her track before they do. Adrian let out a frustrated snarl, glaring at the cave entrance, as if he wanted to tear the mountain down stone by stone. But he knew I was right. Staying here and slaughtering Dante's pack wouldn't get Liyah back. With a synchronized burst of power, we slammed into the wall of wolves separating us from the woods. We tore a hole through their ranks, leaving broken bodies in our wake, and sprinted for the cover of the trees. Behind us, Alpha Mike's enraged howls ordered a pursuit, but we were faster. We were alphas on the hunt for our mate. We hit the woods and instantly split up, widening our search arc. I ran with my nose to the ground, filtering through the overwhelming stench of the battle, searching for that one sweet citrus and wildflower scent that meant everything. Nothing. The air was too thick with the smells of war. Liyah, please, I begged into the silence of my mind. Give me something, anything. Minutes stretched into an eternity. We pushed deeper into the woods, away from the fighting, moving in a wide circle around the mountain. Then, Adrian's voice exploded in my head, sharp with triumph. Got her. Where? I demanded, my heart hammering against my ribs. I spun around, already orienting myself towards his mental signature. Northwest flank, near the old logging road. Faint, but it's her. His mental voice was tight, focused. She's not alone. There's another scent. Old, musty. Sickness. The same sickness I'd smelled near the caves. I'm on my way. I pushed my wolf harder, my paws tearing up the earth as I sprinted through the dense undergrowth. The sounds of the battle behind us were fading, replaced by the rhythmic thud of my own heart and the rustle of wind through the leaves. Minutes later, I burst into a small clearing and saw them. Adrian was already there in his human form, having shifted back to communicate. He was standing a few feet away from Liyah, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with a mixture of relief and lingering fury. Liyah stood frozen in the center of the clearing. She looked shattered. Her clothes were dirty, her hair a wild tangle around her face. But it was her expression that stopped me cold. It wasn't just fear. It was a profound, hollow horror that I had never seen on her before. Her eyes were wide and staring, fixed on something just beyond Adrian. Liyah! I breathed, shifting back into human form as I reached her. I grabbed her shoulders, my hands shaking slightly. Are you hurt? Did they? She flinched violently at my touch, her eyes snapping to mine. They were glassy, unseeing for a moment before recognition dawned. Alex? Her voice was a cracked whisper. I'm here, baby. We're here. I pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her neck, breathing in her scent. Underneath the dirt and sweat, she smelled like herself, like home. But there was an underlying note of acrid terror that made my wolf bristle. Liyah, why did you block us? Adrian demanded, his voice rough as he stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch her arm. You scared the hell out of us. She jerked back from both of us, stumbling a few feet away. Don't. She choked out, holding her hands up as if to ward us off. Please, just don't touch me right now. Adrian and I froze, exchanging a bewildered glance. The rejection was a physical blow. Liyah, what's wrong? I asked gently, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Talk to us. She shook her head frantically, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I can't. Not yet. Her eyes darted past us again, towards the edge of the clearing. I turned to follow her gaze. A woman stood in the shadows of the trees, partially obscured by the darkness. She was wearing a dark green hoodie, the hood pulled up to hide her face. My wolf growled low in my throat. The scent Adrian had mentioned, sickness and decay, was radiating from her. It was thick and cloying, making the air taste foul. Who are you? I demanded, stepping in front of Liyah, placing myself between her and the stranger. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, a silent, ominous sentinel in the darkness. She helped me, Liyah whispered from behind me, her voice trembling. She got me out. Adrian narrowed his eyes, stepping up beside me. Why does she smell like death? Liyah let out a strangled sob. Because she is dying, inside out. I turned back to Liyah, shocked by the despair in her voice. What are you talking about? Liyah looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. She's a healer, Alex, like me. She swallowed hard, her gaze flickering back to the silent woman. Show them. The woman hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached up with bony hands and lowered her hood. In the dim moonlight, her face was a gaunt mask of sorrow. I recognized her. She turned her back to us and lifted the hem of her hoodie. Adrian swore softly. I felt the blood drain from my face. The skin on her back was a monstrosity. It was a blackened, rotting landscape of dead tissue that seemed to be eating her alive. It looked like gangrene, but worse. It pulsed with a faint, sickly, dark energy. Goddess above, Adrian whispered, horrified. The woman dropped her shirt and turned back to face us. This is the price, she said, her voice raspy and hollow. This is what happens when a healer is forced to use their gift against the will of the moon. When we are used as tools, draining ourselves for those who are not our calling. She looked directly at Liyah, her eyes filled with a terrifying pity. They will use you until you are empty, little one. They will rot your body and steal your mind until you don't even remember your own name. You have seen the beginning of your end tonight. I felt Liyah tremble violently behind me. The horror on her face made sense now. It wasn't just Dante she was afraid of. It was this. A fate worse than death. A cold fury, colder than anything I had felt during the battle, washed over me. They hadn't just kidnapped my mate. They had tried to break her soul. I turned to Liyah and pulled her into my arms again, ignoring her initial resistance. I held her tight, shielding her from the sight of the woman, from the truth she represented. Never, I vowed fiercely into her hair. I will burn this whole mountain to the ground before I let anyone do that to you. You hear me? Never. Adrian placed his hand on her back, his touch gentle but firm. We have you now, Liyah. You're safe. But as I held her shivering body against mine, looking over her shoulder at the ruined woman who was a living ghost of a healer's future, I knew the fight had just changed. It wasn't just about territory or pride anymore. It was a war for Liyah's very existence, and I didn't know if we could win it against a destiny that looked so much like a curse. The tender moment shattered, the distant rumble of paws on the forest floor, growing louder and closer by the second, cut through the silence. They found the trail. I cursed under my breath, the sound raw and harsh. They're coming, we have to move now. Adrian's head snapped to the side, his ears twitching. His eyes went distant for a split second as he tapped into his pack link. Denise is close, he said urgently, his voice tight. She brought the enforcers. They're cutting across the eastern ridge to intercept. He turned to me, his expression hard and determined. Take Liyah. Get her out of here. Get her back to safety. We'll hold them off. My stomach clenched. Adrian, no. We stay together. We fight together. Don't be an idiot, Alex, he snapped, already beginning to shift back into his wolf form, his bones cracking and reshaping. You can't protect her and fight off Dante's entire pack at the same time. They want her. If you're here, she's a target. His voice dropped to a growl. Get our mate safe. That's your only job right now. Liyah grasped my arm, her fingernails digging in. No, we can't leave him. There are too many of them. Her voice was high with panic, her eyes darting between me and Adrian's transforming body. Adrian, now fully a massive midnight blue wolf, chuffed softly. He nudged her hand with his wet nose, his golden eyes gazing into hers with an intensity that made my chest ache. I'm fine, Liyah. His voice echoed in both of our heads, calm and steady despite the approaching chaos. I'm stronger now, because of you. He gave a short, confident huff. If things get bad, I'll just think of you, and everything will be fine. Liyah let out a shaky breath, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, be careful, please. Go, Adrian commanded. turning his massive head toward the approaching sounds of the enemy pack. I didn't waste another second. I stepped back, letting the change take me. My body contorted, bones lengthening and snapping into place, fur sprouting from my skin. In seconds, I stood on 4 paws, a large black wolf shaking out his coat. I lowered my body to the ground, looking at Liyah, silently urging her to climb onto my back. "Wait," Liyah said, her voice firm even though it trembled. She turned to the hooded woman who was still standing silently at the edge of the clearing. "She's coming with us." My head snapped towards her and I let out a low, unhappy growl. "No," I sent through the bond, my mental voice sharp. "It's too dangerous. She'll slow us down. We don't know her." Adrian's growl joined mine. "She smells like death, Liyah. We can't trust her." Liyah didn't back down. She planted her feet, her chin jutting out stubbornly. "She saved my life. If she hadn't helped me escape the caves, I'd still be there. I owe her." Her voice wavered slightly. "And I need to know more. About what happened to her. About the curse." I looked at the woman, at the living, rotting warning of what my mate could become. A cold dread settled in my gut. Liyah was right. We needed answers. With a grunt of frustration, I lowered myself further, conceding. Liyah turned to the woman and held out her hand. "Come on. We're getting you out of here." The woman hesitated, her sunken eyes flickering with fear and something else. Hope. Then she slowly moved forward and grasped Liyah's hand. Liyah climbed onto my back, settling herself and gripping my fur tight. The hooded woman climbed up behind her, her bony arms wrapping around Liyah's waist. Her weight was nothing, like carrying a ghost. The scent of sickness and decay on her was stronger now, cloying and foul, making my nose twitch in disgust. I turned my head one last time to look at Adrian. "Watch your back, brother," I sent. "Don't do anything stupid." He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on the woods where the enemy wolves would emerge any second. His hackles were raised, his muscles coiled for a fight. "Get gone, Alex. Don't worry about me." With a final, powerful thrust of my hind legs, I launched myself forward, sprinting away from the clearing, away from my brother, and into the dark, dangerous heart of the woods, carrying my world on my back. I ran without stopping, pushed by the need to put as much distance between Dante's pack and Liyah as possible. The extra weight was negligible, but the constant, cloying stench of the healer woman was a grim reminder of the stakes. We tore through the underbrush, a silent shadow against the darkening woods. Suddenly I skidded to a halt. Ahead, a group of 5 wolves blocked the path. Rogues. Their scents were a chaotic mix of desperation, dirt, and old blood. They were gaunt, their fur matted, eyes gleaming with predatory hunger in the dim light. They snarled, hackles rising as they sensed our approach. I didn't back down. I stood my ground, a low, rumbling growl vibrating in my chest that was deeper and more primal than anything they could produce. I channeled every ounce of my alpha dominance, projecting a wave of raw power and unyielding aggression. "Move," I commanded silently, my gaze locking with the lead rogues. It wasn't a request. It was a promise of violence. They hesitated. They knew me. Not personally, perhaps, but they knew what I was. They knew the stories of the alpha who could tear a throat out without a second thought, who showed no mercy to those who threatened what was his. The leader whined, his tail tucking between his legs. He took a step back, then another. The others followed suit, their aggression melting into fear. They parted, forming a wide, respectful circle around us, heads lowered in submission. "They're afraid of you," Liyah's voice whispered in my mind, a hint of awe mixed with her fear. "They should be," I replied curtly, not breaking my stare until we were well past them. I pushed off again, resuming our frantic pace. Fear keeps them in line. It keeps you safe. We ran for what felt like hours. The sky grew heavier, the air thick with moisture. Then, the first drops fell. Cold, stinging rain that quickly turned into a downpour, soaking through my fur and plastering Liyah's clothes to her skin. Behind her, the healer woman began to whine. It started low, a pained whimpering that escalated into agonizing gasps with each jolt of my stride. "Are you okay?" Liyah asked, her voice laced with worry. She twisted around trying to see the woman. "The rain," the woman choked out, her voice barely audible over the drumming downpour. "It burns. Like acid. Please, shelter. Anywhere." I growled in frustration. Burning. What kind of sickness was this? But I couldn't ignore her pain, not with Liyah's distress bleeding through the bond. I scanned the surroundings, my vision blurred by the rain. Then I saw it. A faint, warm glow through the trees to the east. A light. "Hang on," I told them, veering towards the light. I pushed my body harder, ignoring the burning in my own muscles, the slick mud threatening to send me sprawling. The light grew brighter, revealing a small, secluded cabin nestled in a small clearing. It looked sturdy, built of logs, with warm light spilling from a window. Smoke curled from a stone chimney. I reached the porch, skidding to a stop on the wet wood. Liyah slid off my back, immediately reaching to help the woman down. The healer collapsed onto the porch planks, her body shaking uncontrollably, whimpers of pain escaping her lips. I shifted back into human form in a fluid motion, my naked body steaming in the cold air. I didn't have time for modesty. I stepped over the woman and tried the door. Unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, invading someone's home. But necessity outweighed manners. I stepped inside, my senses on high alert, scanning the room. A fireplace crackled with a warm fire. A comfortable-looking armchair sat beside it, and a small kitchenette was in the corner. But no one was there. It was empty. "Get her inside," I rasped, stepping back to allow Liyah and the woman entry. Liyah half-carried, half-dragged the woman over the threshold. As soon as they were inside, the woman's legs gave out completely. She collapsed onto a small braided rug in front of the fire, her body convulsing. "Oh my God!" Liyah cried, dropping to her knees beside her. I quickly moved to them, scooping the woman up in my arms. She was terrifyingly light, and laying her gently on the small, worn couch nearby. Liyah reached out and pulled back the soaking wet hood of the woman's sweatshirt. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. I looked down and felt my stomach turn. The skin on the woman's face and neck, where the rain had touched it, was sizzling. It looked raw, angry, red, and blistering, as if she had been splashed with acid. The dead, blackened tissue on her back seemed to be reacting to the moisture, pulsing with a sickening dark light. "Goddess," I breathed, revulsion and pity warring within me. What kind of twisted magic was this? Liyah looked up at me, her eyes wide with terror reflecting the firelight. Her voice trembled, barely a whisper. "Alex, is this how I'm going to end up?" Her question hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to deny it, to promise her again that I would never let that happen, but the words died in my throat. The fear in her eyes was too real, the evidence right in front of us too damning. Before I could say anything, the cabin door burst open with a bang that made us all jump. A woman stood there, her gray hair plastered to her head by the rain, a fierce scowl on her weathered face. In her hands, held with surprising steadiness, was a double-barreled shotgun, aimed directly at us. "Who the hell are you, and what are you doing in my house?" she barked, her voice sharp with suspicion and anger. Liyah flinched closer to me. My wolf surged forward, itching to shift, to neutralize the threat, to tear the weapon from her hands. A growl rumbled deep in my chest, a warning. But I forced it down. We were the intruders. We were in the wrong. I held up my hands slowly, palms out in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "We needed shelter. The woman, she's sick, the rain." The woman didn't lower the gun. Her sharp gaze darted from me, a naked man in her living room, to Liyah, huddled on the floor, and finally rested on the figure on the couch. Her eyes narrowed, her brow furrowing in confusion. She took a cautious step forward, the gun still trained on us, but the aggressive edge in her posture softened slightly. She peered closely at the woman on the couch, her expression shifting from suspicion to disbelief. "Nora," she whispered, the name barely a breath. I frowned, confused. "You know her?" The woman lowered the gun slowly, as if she had forgotten she was holding it. She walked past me, her eyes fixed on the woman's ravaged face, a look of utter shock and dawning horror on her own. "Know her," she murmured, her voice trembling. She reached out a hand, hovering it over the woman's cheek but not daring to touch. "Yes, God help me. She's my daughter." The silence that fell over the cabin was heavier than the storm outside. The word daughter hung in the smoky air, a grotesque impossibility against the sight of the rotting creature on the couch. I lowered my hand slowly, my muscles still coiled tight. The threat level had just shifted dramatically, from immediate violence to a profound, confusing tragedy. I was acutely aware of my nakedness now, a stark contrast to the raw, emotional exposure happening in front of me. Liyah let out a small, choked gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. She looked from the hardened woman with the shotgun to the broken shell of a human on the couch, her eyes wide with a horrified pity that mirrored my own growing unease. The older woman, the mother, didn't seem to notice us anymore. The shotgun clattered to the wooden floor, forgotten, as she fell to her knees beside the couch. Her weathered hands hovered over Nora's face, shaking violently. She seemed terrified to touch her own child, afraid she might crumble to ash beneath her fingertips. "Nora," she whispered again, her voice cracking into a sob. "But they told me. It's been 5 years. They said you were dead." On the couch, Nora stirred. It was a shallow, painful wheeze of breath. Her eyelids fluttered, peeling back to reveal eyes glazed with agony and exhaustion. They rolled wildly for a moment before focusing hazily on the woman hovering over her. Her lips, cracked and dry, moved silently before a sound emerged. A sound that tore at my gut. "Mama?" The older woman let out a wail that was pure heartbreak. She disregarded the sizzling raw flesh on Nora's face and buried her face in her daughter's neck, heedless of the decay, sobbing uncontrollably. "Oh God, Nora, what have they done to you? My baby, what have they done?" The smell of the sickness was overpowering now, mixed with the sharp tang of maternal grief and the ozone scent of the storm. I stepped back, giving them space, but my mind was racing, connecting terrifying dots. 5 years. They said she was dead. I turned to Liyah. She was trembling, her eyes fixed on the reunion, tears streaming silently down her own dirt-streaked face. But underneath the sadness, I saw the terror reignited. Is this my future? I moved to her, wrapping my arms around her, pulling her tightly against my bare chest. I needed her close. I needed to reassure myself that she was whole, that her skin was smooth and healthy, that she wasn't rotting from the inside out. "She's okay," I murmured into her hair, a desperate mantra. "You're okay. We're going to figure this out." She clutched at my back, her fingers digging in like claws. "Alex, she's..." Her own mother didn't recognize her. "I know," I said grimly. My eyes were fixed on the pair by the fire. I needed answers, and this woman, this grieving mother, held the key. I waited until the mother's sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths. She pulled back slightly, trying to wipe the rain and tears from Nora's face with her sleeve, wincing when Nora whimpered at the friction. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low but firm, cutting through the emotional fog. The woman froze, then slowly turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, filled with a mixture of sorrow and a sudden, sharp realization. She looked at me, naked, powerful, clearly not fully human even in this form. And then at Liyah, clutching me for dear life. She sniffed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, some of her previous steel returning to her spine. "You're wolves," she stated flatly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. I gestured to Liyah. "And she is a healer, like your daughter." The woman's eyes widened slightly, shifting back to Liyah with a new intensity. A look of profound pity crossed her face. "Another one," she whispered, bitter irony in her tone. "They found another one." My jaw tightened. "Who are they?" I demanded, stepping closer. "You said they told you she was dead. Who took her 5 years ago?" The woman looked down at her ruined daughter, stroking Nora's matted hair with a trembling hand. When she looked back up at me, her eyes burned with a hatred so intense it rivaled my own. "The same monsters I assume you're running from," she spat. "The mountain pack, Alpha Mike and his sadistic sons." 5 years ago, she said, her voice hollow. She went gathering herbs near the boundary line. She never came back. I went to the packlands, begged for word. Alpha Mike's beta laughed in my face, said a rogue got her, said she was dead. Her hand shook on Nora's shoulder. "But a mother knows. In my gut I knew she wasn't gone. I've kept this light on every night since, hoping." Liyah stepped away from me, her voice shaking but urgent. "Ma'am, it's not just that they took her. It's what they forced her to do. The decay on her back, the memory loss. She didn't know who she was until recently." She pointed to the sizzling burns on Nora's face. "And the rain outside. Why did it burn her like acid?" She was screaming. The mother looked at Liyah, a deep, ancient sadness in her eyes. "The earth knows what's unnatural, child. The healing they force, it corrupts the spirit and the flesh. Nature rejects corruption. The rain is pure. It tries to burn away the rot." She stood up shakily, wiping her hands on her apron. "I have herbs, old remedies. They won't cure the decay. Nothing stops that once it starts. But they'll soothe the burning and stop the spread for a while. I'll make a poultice." She turned her sharp gaze on Liyah. "And you need to take off those wet clothes and hang them up near the stove. You're shaking apart." Liyah looked down at herself, as if just realizing she was soaked to the bone. She nodded mutely, another spasm of shivering racking her shoulders. The woman disappeared up a narrow staircase and returned quickly with a bundle of flannel. "Here. They belong to my husband. They'll swallow you whole, but they're dry and warm." "Thank you," Liyah whispered, clutching the fabric like a lifeline before slipping behind a modest partition near the kitchenette to change. While she was gone, the mother turned her sharp gaze on me, naked and imposing in her small living room. "So, Wolf, what's your plan for that girl?" she asked, jerking her head toward the partition. "You sure as hell know Mike and those devil sons of his won't stop until they get her back. They taste that kind of power. They never let go." A low growl vibrated deep in my chest at the mention of them. The image of Dante touching her made my vision haze red. "They'll have to go through me," I said, my voice flat and lethal. "They touch her again. I kill them all." She held my gaze, unimpressed by the alpha posturing. "Brave words, but bravery gets you dead against them. You need more than teeth, boy. You need a way out." Liyah emerged then, drowning in an oversized red plaid shirt that hung to her knees. She moved to the stove, hanging her wet clothes near the heat. The mother nodded toward the stairs. "Take the room upstairs. It's got the only real bed. You two will share it. I'll stay down here with Nora." She glanced at Liyah. "Your girlfriend looks like she's about to pass out if she's not rested." Liyah paused at the stairs, looking back at the couch. "Will Nora be fine?" The mother was already crushing herbs in a stone bowl. "She's home. I'll tend to her. She'll be resting easier by morning. Go." We went up the creaky stairs. The room under the eaves was cramped, dominated by a bed that looked barely big enough for one person, let alone two. Especially one of my size. The air up here was cooler, damp from the storm outside. Without a word, Liyah crawled under the thick quilts, pulling them right up to her nose. The bed shook with the force of her shivering. "God, it's freezing in here," she muttered into the blankets. I stood by the door, watching the lump under the covers shake. My heart ached for her. I wanted nothing more than to warm her, to wrap myself around her and chase the chill away. But the tiny bed and the residual adrenaline of the chase made me hesitate. I was still running high on aggression. Being that cramped in human form felt volatile. She poked her head out, her teeth chattering. "Alex, why aren't you coming in?" I rubbed the back of my neck, acutely aware of how little space there was. I don't think it's a good idea. The bed is tiny and I'm edgy. Too big. Too much. "You're naked and you're freezing," she argued, her eyes exasperated. "Don't be ridiculous." Then, A thought seemed to strike her, and her expression softened. If you're worried about sleeping next to me like that, then shift. Be my wolf eater. That would be even better, actually. You're warmer that way, and you take up less space curled up. A surprised chuckle escaped me, breaking the tension in my chest. The practicality of her request, amidst all the horror of the night, was disarming. She just wanted her giant radiator dog. All right, I agreed, the knot in my stomach loosening. She scooted as far to the edge against the wall as she could, tapping the mattress beside her. Come on, you need rest too, please. I walked over to the bed, the floorboards creaking under my weight. It was absurdly small. I had to turn sideways just to slide in next to her, my back pressed against the cold wall. I pulled the heavy quilt over us, the warmth of her body instantly radiating through the oversized shirt she wore. It was a tight fit, even in human form. My shoulder was wedged against hers, my hip pressed into her thigh. Her scent, rain, fear, and something distinctly, wonderfully Liyah, filled my nose, chasing away the smell of decay from downstairs. I lay there, staring at the low ceiling, listening to the relentless rhythm of the rain hammering on the roof. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the unspoken events of the past few days. She shifted, turning onto her side to face me. Her hand came out from under the covers and tentatively touched my arm, her fingers tracing the outline of my bicep. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "I'm fine," I said automatically, the standard alpha response. But then I looked at her, really looked at her in the dim light, and the truth forced its way out. "I hate that he touched you. I hate that I wasn't there to stop it." She let out a shaky breath. "I'm scared, Alex. Dante. He said he will kill Father and my friend Hannah, that he will burn them alive." Her voice hitched. I don't know if he was lying to control me or if he meant it. My whole body tensed, a growl rumbling low in my chest. Burning them alive. The cruelty was staggering, even for wolves like them. A tear tracked a hot path across her cheek. I know we weren't on good terms, my father and I, but I don't want him dead. Not like that. Not because of me. The guilt in her voice was a physical weight. I reached out, covering her hand on my arm with my own. "We can find out," I said. "Do you want to go back? To Ethiopia, to check?" She went still. Is that even possible? With them hunting us? "Anything is possible," I stated, with a conviction I wasn't sure I fully felt, but needed her to believe. "We'll make it possible. We can cross borders they can't easily follow. We'll get you there." "Tomorrow?" she asked, her voice small, filled with a fragile hope. "Tomorrow," I promised. "First light, we leave." The relief that washed over her was palpable. She shifted closer, her head finding the hollow of my shoulder. The scent of her so close was intoxicating. My hand moved of its own volition, reaching up to cup her cheek, her skin soft and cool under my palm. I couldn't help myself. I tilted her chin up and kissed her. It started soft, a gentle reassurance, but the moment our lips met, a spark ignited. The fear and adrenaline of the night transmuted into a fierce, desperate need. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent, hungry. She responded instantly, a soft moan escaping her throat as she pressed her body against mine, eliminating the last sliver of space between us. Her curves molded to my hard planes, a perfect fit even in this cramped space. My hand slid down her neck over her shoulder and then slipped underneath the hem of the oversized flannel shirt. Her skin was incredibly soft, warm silk against my calloused palm. I traced the curve of her waist, my fingers splaying over the dip of her spine, feeling the delicate ridges of her vertebrae. Her breath hitched, a sharp intake of air that sent a tremor through me. Her hands, which had been resting on my chest, began to move. She explored the muscles of my pectorals, her fingertips tracing the lines of definition, her palms flat and warm against my skin. Every nerve ending in my body was on fire. The sensation of her touch on my bare skin was electric, a current of raw desire that threatened to consume me. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched hers. The small bed suddenly felt impossibly intimate, a private world where only the two of us existed. Then, from the floor below, a sharp, craggy voice cut through the hazy heat. "Don't you two even think about making out in my bed. I can hear you breathing from down here." Liyah gasped and yanked her head back as if she'd been stung, scrambling backward until her back hit the wall. A flush of heat rose in my own neck, a mix of intense frustration and embarrassment. "God damn it," I muttered under my breath, squeezing my eyes shut. Talk about a mood killer. A tiny, breathy laugh escaped Liyah, and I opened my eyes to see her covering her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking with silent mirth. The tension in the room dissipated, replaced by an awkward, humorous silence. I sighed, running a hand through my hair, and flopped back onto the pillows, staring at the ceiling again. We lay there for a moment, the sound of the rain the only noise filling the sudden void. Then Liyah's voice, quiet and hesitant, broke the silence again. "Alex?" "Yeah? Why? Why is Adrian like that?" I stiffened. Adrian. The name was a bucket of ice water on the lingering warmth of the moment. "Like what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "The touching," she said. "Why does he flinch away from everyone? Why does he act like skin-to-skin contact is agony for him? Except with me." I let out a heavy sigh, the weight of old family secrets pressing down on me. This wasn't a story I enjoyed telling, but after everything she'd been through, she deserved to know. The rain hammered against the roof, a relentless drum roll that filled the heavy silence in the tiny attic room. I stared up into the darkness, feeling the warmth of Liyah's body pressed against my side, a stark contrast to the cold, jagged memories I was dragging up from the depths. "Our mother," I began, my voice rough, scraping against my throat. "She was sick for a long time before the end. We were young, maybe 6 or 7. I remember the house always smelled like sickness, like dried lavender and antiseptic. She was just fading, getting smaller and quieter every day." Liyah remained perfectly still, her breathing shallow against my chest, listening. One afternoon I left her room, just for a minute. I think I went to the kitchen to get her water. Adrian stayed behind. I paused, swallowing past the lump that always formed when I talked about this. He didn't understand dying. He was just a little kid who wanted his mom to wake up and play. He tried to pull her up. He tugged on her arm. I closed my eyes, seeing the scene as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The pale light in the room, the dust motes dancing. She was so frail, Liyah, like a bird. When he pulled, she just tumbled out of the high bed. She hit the floor hard, and then she stopped breathing. Liyah's hand tightened on my arm, her fingernails digging in slightly. When I ran back in, the silence was worse than the sound of the fall. Adrian was on the floor beside her, not even making a sound, just shaking violently, tears running down his face. She looked broken. I let out a shaky breath, turning my head slightly on the pillow so my cheek brushed against her hair. I scooped her up. I was barely big enough to hold her head off the floor. She opened her eyes one last time. She smiled. God knows where she found the strength for that. And she whispered to me, "Take care of your brother." And then she was gone. She died right there in my arms, with Adrian watching. The words hung heavy in the damp air. From that day on, I said quieter. Adrian's brain rewired itself. He blamed himself entirely. His wolf shattered before it could even fully form. His body learned one terrible, absolute truth in that moment. When I touch someone I love, they break. They die. I turned my head further, looking at her profile in the dim light filtering from the stairwell. That's why he flinches. It's not disgust. It's terror. It's ingrained, paralyzing guilt. Every time someone gets close, he's 7 years old again, watching his mother fall. Liyah let out a soft, heartbroken sound. "Oh, Adrian." "Yeah," I grunted. The protective urge for my brother, the one that had defined my entire life since that day, surged up. That's why what happened in the woods, with you, It was a miracle. You touched him, and you didn't break. You healed him. We lay in silence for a moment, the tragedy of it soaking into the room. But the story wasn't finished. There was the other part, the darker part that I carried alone. But that's not the whole story, I murmured, my voice hardening involuntarily. That's just the part Adrian knows. She shifted slightly, sensing the change in my tone. What do you mean? The rage, old and familiar, coiled in my gut. It was a different kind of pain than the grief from my mother. It was a hot, corrosive acid. When I ran for help that day, before I went back into the room and found them on the floor, I ran downstairs toward my father's study. I thought he could help. A low growl vibrated in my chest, one I couldn't suppress. The door was ajar. He wasn't alone. He was with her, our mother's closest friend. I spat the words out, disgusted. While his true mate lay dying upstairs, slipping away, he was screwing her best friend against his desk. I felt Liyah stiffen against me, her breath hitching in horror. Adrian carries the guilt of killing her, I whispered into the darkness, the bitterness coating my tongue. I carry the rage of knowing she died betrayed. Liyah was quiet for a long time, digesting the venom in my words. Her hand moved from my arm, sliding up to rest flat over my heart, feeling the heavy, steady thud beneath the skin. "And you?" she asked softly, her voice cutting through the darkness. "How did you survive carrying that? You look so fine, unbreakable, like stone. Is it just a mask for Adrian? Are you just playing the strong big brother so he doesn't fall apart completely?" The question pierced the armor I'd worn for years, finding the raw flesh beneath. "Stone cracks, Liyah," I grated out, the admission tasting like ash. "It doesn't feel fine. It never has. It's a rot inside me. Every time I look at my father, I see the betrayal in his eyes. Every time I see her walking around the packlands, acting like she didn't help destroy my family, and it burns." I closed my eyes tight against the memory of that open study door. It's not strength. It's necessity. If I fell apart, who was going to hold Adrian together? Who was going to lead when the time came? But yeah, sometimes my voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Just thinking about that day, the sheer ugliness of it, it takes the wind right out of my lungs. It feels like I'm suffocating on it. The people my mother trusted most in this world, her mate, her best friend, they were the ones twisting the knife while she took her last breath. Liyah didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she shifted violently in the small space, wrapping both her arms around my torso, squeezing with surprising, fierce strength. It was a protective embrace, one that demanded I let her hold some of the weight. "You've been holding too much yourself," she whispered fiercely into my neck, her warm breath ghosting over my pulse point. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I'm sorry you've been hurting like this in the dark. And everyone just let you be the strong one because it was easier for them. No one ever noticed you were bleeding too." Her acknowledgement, her ability to see me behind the alpha title and the stoic front, broke something open inside my chest that I hadn't realized was locked tight. The suffocating feeling eased, replaced by a profound warmth that had nothing to do with the blankets. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her as tightly against me as the cramped bed allowed, burying my face in her hair. I pressed a lingering kiss to her forehead, breathing in the scent of rain and resilience. "I feel lighter now," I confessed, realizing it was true. "Since Ethiopia, since I found you." I pulled back just enough to look into her eyes in the shadows. Maybe the moon goddess knew exactly what she was doing, sending me there. I thought I was just escaping, taking a break from the pressure. But maybe she was kicking my ass, telling me, "Hurry up, Alex, your woman is waiting. Go help your brother heal." I managed a faint, genuine smile in the dark. Turns out, the joke was on me. I needed the healing just as badly as my brother did. A soft chuckle vibrated against my chest, a beautiful sound over the drumming rain. "Well, she certainly has a dramatic sense of timing," she murmured. She wiggled closer, fitting her curves perfectly against my side, burying her face in the crook of my neck. Her breathing slowed almost instantly, exhaustion finally claiming her. "Good night, Alex. Thank you for telling me." "Good night, Liyah," I whispered into her hair. But sleep didn't come for me. The bed was a torture device for someone my size. My shoulder was jammed hard against the cold wall, and my feet hung well off the end of the mattress. But it wasn't just the physical discomfort keeping me wired. The storm outside howled, battering the old cabin. Every creak of timber, every gust of wind that rattled the window pane set my nerves on edge. Dante was out there. He knew this area. He knew about Nora's mother. I lay staring into the darkness, my arm going numb beneath Liyah's weight, but I didn't move a muscle to disturb her. My mind was a razor-sharp sentinel, pushing past the noise of the storm, listening for a snap of a twig, a shift in scent, anything that spelled threat. I wasn't sleeping tonight, not when I finally held my future in my arms, and the past was hunting us down. The hours dragged, measured not by a clock, but by the throbbing numbness creeping down my left arm trapped beneath Liyah's shoulders. My right side was jammed against the icy plaster of the slanted wall, leaching the heat from my skin. It was miserable, physically speaking, but I wouldn't have moved an inch if the cabin caught fire. Her steady, soft breathing against my neck was the only anchor I had. Every time the wind slammed into the cabin with renewed fury, making the old timbers groan in protest, my muscles coiled tighter beneath the quilt, ready to spring over her. I cataloged the sounds of the night, filtering them through a sieve of paranoia. The rain changing tempo from a roar to a steady drumming, the settling of the house's foundation in the mud, the occasional snore from the old woman downstairs. None of them were Dante's pack, not yet. My mind replayed the conversation, the raw admissions hanging in the air long after silence had reclaimed the room. I had given her the darkest parts of myself, the foundational rod of my family, and she hadn't flinched. Instead, she'd held tighter. The weight of that acceptance was terrifying in a way no physical threat ever could be. It raised the stakes. Before I was fighting for my mate, for an innocent woman caught in pack politics. Now I was fighting for Liyah, the woman who knew the broken boy inside the alpha, and wanted him anyway. Eventually, the relentless drumming on the roof softened to a steady, dreary patter. The pitch-black square of the small window faded to a bruised, watery gray. Dawn. The safety of the dark was evaporating. The real danger started now. Moving in daylight, even bad daylight, increased the risk of being spotted exponentially. We needed every second of head start we could get before Dante realized we weren't just hiding in the woods, but actively fleeing the continent. I shifted carefully, wincing as blood rushed back into my dead arm like liquid fire. I used my good hand to brush a stray braid back from her cheek. Her face was relaxed in sleep, younger, free from the terror that had defined the last week. I hated to steal that peace from her. "Liyah," I whispered, pitching my voice just loud enough to cut through her dreams close to her ear. "Wake up. It's time." Her eyes snapped open. There was no drowsy confusion, no moment of disorientation, just instant, sharp clarity. Fear was back, tightening the corners of her beautiful eyes, but beneath it was a hardened resolve. She nodded once, wordlessly, and sat up, shivering slightly as the heavy quilt fell away from her shoulders in the freezing attic air. She dressed back into her clothes in tight silence. I moved to the window, peering out through the rain-streaked glass. The woods were a sodden mess of browns and grays, mist clinging low to the ground. Visibility was poor, which cut both ways. It hid us, but it hid them too. "Ready?" I asked, turning back to her. My voice was low, back in command mode. The tender confessions of the night were packed away, stored fuel for the fight ahead. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Ready." I led the way down the narrow, protesting stairs, testing each step. The main room downstairs smelled of cold ashes and stale coffee. Nora's mother was already up, sitting in the rocking chair by the dead hearth, the shotgun resting across her knees. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but alert. She looked from me to Liyah, her expression unreadable. "Rain's let up some," she said, her voice raspy. "Still miserable out there?" "Miserable is good," I said shortly. Keeps heads down and sense dampened. I moved toward the door, the urge to be out of this confined space suddenly overwhelming. I needed open air. I needed to run. I put my hand on the latch, then paused, looking back at the old woman. She had risked everything harboring us. If they come here, they won't find anything but a grieving mother and her sick daughter. She cut me off, her grip tightening on the shotgun. "Get going, before I change my mind about helping wolves." I nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a debt I probably couldn't repay. I grabbed Liyah's hand, intertwining our fingers. Her grip was tight, her palm clammy. "Stay close to my flank," I instructed her, my voice rough. "If I tell you to run, you don't look back. You just run. Understand?" "Yes," she whispered. I pulled the latch and shoved the heavy wooden door open. The morning air hit us like a physical blow, cold, wet, and smelling intensely of saturated earth and pine. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling Liyah with me into the gray, hostile world, my senses expanding outward, hunting for the enemy before we took the first step toward freedom. The moment my boots hit the mud beyond the porch steps, I let go. I shifted into my wolf form. The world shifted focus, smells becoming sharper, pine needles, wet decay, and the faint, stale scent of rogues, and colors dulling into the monochrome spectrum of the wolf. I was bigger now, massive black fur slicked down by the rain, my breath huffing out in clouds of steam. I turned my massive head toward Liyah. She looked impossibly small against the backdrop of the towering, dripping trees, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and lingering fear. She didn't hesitate, though. She grabbed fistfuls of the thick fur at my nape and hauled herself onto my back, wrapping her legs tight around my midsection. I didn't wait. I launched myself forward, claws tearing up the saturated earth for traction. We became a blur of black fur and speed weaving through the dense underbrush. I pushed my wolf harder than I ever had, my muscles burning, lungs pumping the frigid air like bellows. Every shadow felt like an ambush, every snapping twig like a gunshot. The only goal was the borderline of redwood. It felt like hours, a relentless pounding of paws against mud, before the scent markers changed. The stale rogue stink faded, replaced by the crisp, territorial borders of my home pack. We burst through the final line of trees, the sprawling pack house rising in the distance like a fortress. I slowed to a trot near the garages, lowering my body so Liyah could slide off. Her legs were shaky when she hit the ground, her face pale from the ride. "Go pack," I told her, my voice guttural as I shifted back, the transition leaving me naked and shivering until I grabbed a spare pair of shorts kept in a lockbox by the door. "Essentials only. We leave in 20 minutes. She nodded, already moving toward the house. "I'll be ready." I strode into the mudroom, the familiar chaotic energy of the pack house hitting me. A few early risers were in the kitchen. Seth, one of the pack's enforcers, looked up from a bowl of cereal, his spoon clattering into the bowl. "Alex, we didn't know you were inbound. You look like hell." "Where's Adrian?" I demanded, ignoring his assessment. "He came back yesterday," Seth said quickly, sensing my mood. "But he left again almost immediately, with Denise." I stopped cold. "Denise?" "Yeah, they took off toward the northern ridge. He said to tell you if you checked in that they were fine. That was it." I ground my teeth. It wasn't ideal, but if he was with Denise, he wasn't alone, and he wasn't dead. That had to be enough for now. "Listen to me," I commanded, locking eyes with Seth. "When he gets back, you tell him Liyah and I had to go to Ethiopia. Tell him Dante made threats against her family, and we're dealing with it. Tell him we'll be back soon and to stay put." Seth nodded rapidly. "Got it, Alpha. Ethiopia, Dante threats, stay put." I left him there and took the stairs two at a time. My room felt alien, a remnant of a life before the woods. I showered in under 3 minutes, scrubbing the mud and the lingering scent of fear from my skin. I dressed in dark jeans and a Henley, the fabric feeling constrictive after days in the wild. I grabbed my passport, wallet, and a go-bag I always kept packed from under the bed. Downstairs, Liyah was by the door, a small duffel bag at her feet. Julie and Liyah were hovering around her, looking concerned and confused, but they scattered when I approached, sensing the thundercloud radiating from me. "Let's go," I said, grabbing her bag. We took one of the pack cars. The drive to the airport was a tense blur of asphalt and silence. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror almost as much as the road ahead, paranoia a persistent itch under my skin until we were through security and boarding the plane. The flight was interminable. We landed in Addis Ababa and took a smaller, rattling transport up into the highlands toward Entoto. The air here was thinner, cooler, smelling of eucalyptus smoke and red dust. It was a world away from the damp forests of redwood and red moon, and I felt the shift in territory deep in my bones. I was an outsider here. When the taxi dropped us near her street, she turned to me, her anxiety palpable. "Alex, please. You can't come to the door. My father, he is difficult. It will be easier if I go alone first." I shook my head slowly, the wolf inside me bristling at the very suggestion of leaving her unprotected in this new environment. "Not happening, Liyah. Dante knows where your family lives. You aren't walking up to that door alone." She looked like she wanted to argue, but the set of my jaw told her it was useless. We walked down the dusty path together. I scanned the surrounding houses, the shadows between them. She stopped in front of a modest, brightly painted house. I heard the breath whoosh out of her. "It's standing," she whispered, relief sagging her shoulders. "It's not burned." She hurried to the door and knocked rapidly. "Baba? Eti, it's me, Liyah." The door creaked open. A woman with a patterned headscarf and a tired face peered out. Her eyes went wide. "Liyah, Getai." Before the stepmother could say another word, the door was wrenched open wider. A short, stocky man with grizzled hair stepped out, his face a thundercloud of instant rage. He didn't speak. He just swung. The slap echoed like a gunshot in the quiet street. It was vicious, a full-force backhand that sent Liyah stumbling backward. I moved faster than a thought. I caught her before she fell, pulling her against my chest. A low, menacing growl tore from my throat, loud enough to make the stepmother shrink back in terror. The wolf roared, demanding blood. I looked at the small man with murderous intent, my muscles coiled to snap his neck. I reached for him, my hand a claw. "No, Alex, stop." Liyah grabbed my forearm, digging her nails in, using her entire body weight to hold me back. "Don't touch him, please." The father didn't even flinch at my aggression. He spat something rapid and harsh in Amharic, his tone vibrating with indignation. He turned his glaring eyes on me, looking me up and down with undisguised disgust. "Why would you take my daughter without my knowledge?" he demanded in heavily accented English. "Do you know how much I invested in her? Schooling, food, housing, all for you to just get into her pants for free?" My blood ran cold with revulsion. Invested. Like she was livestock. "Baba, it wasn't like that. We were—" Liyah tried to interject, stepping slightly in front of me. Smack. He hit her again, harder this time, open-palmed across the cheek. "Shut your mouth. You bring shame to this house." I surged forward, vision red, but Liyah's voice slammed into my head through the bond, desperate and panicked. "Alex, no. You cannot hurt him here. If you hurt him, I lose everything. Please, I am begging you, stand down." I froze, vibrating with impotent volcanic fury. It took every ounce of discipline I possessed not to rip his throat out right there on the dusty doorstep. My hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles turned white. I glared at him with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, a look that promised violence if I were ever unleashed. The stepmother, looking terrified, grabbed Liyah's arm and yanked her inside the doorway away from both men. The father puffed out his chest, immune to my lethal glare now that his property was secured. He pointed a stubby finger at my chest. "Now tell me," he demanded, his eyes narrowing greedily. "Did you bring her back to discard her after using her up? Or are you here to pay for her? Because that is what I need from you. You are going to marry her and pay the bride price or get nothing."
The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the burn of shame that flooded my entire body. My stepmother's grip on my arm was tight, her nails digging in through my sleeve as she pulled me into the dim hallway of the house I'd grown up in. It smelled the same, a mixture of roasted coffee, old wood smoke, and the faint underlying scent of dust. It was the smell of home, but now it choked me. Outside the open door, my father's words hung in the air, crude and ugly. Investment. Use her. Pay the bride price. I closed my eyes, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me whole. I had feared Alex's violence, feared the beast I knew lived just beneath his skin. But this calculated reduction of my worth to currency, spoken to the man I loved, was a different kind of violence. It was a slow, humiliating poison. Through the bond, I felt Alex's rage, a roiling, molten lake of fury that he was barely containing for my sake. "Alex, please," I sent the thought desperately, a silent prayer across the distance between our minds. "Don't move. Let me handle this." His response was a tight knot of tension, a silent growl that vibrated in my own chest. But he stayed put. He didn't tear the door off its hinges. He didn't kill my father. That restraint, that monumental effort of will, made my heart ache with a fierce, painful love for him, even as my face throbbed. "Gitai, what have you done?" Ete whispered frantically, her eyes darting between me and the open door. "Who is this man? Why did you leave like that? Your father has been... He has been impossible." "Ete, please, I had to," I murmured, my voice thick. "It's complicated. He saved my life." Before she could ask more, heavy footsteps crunched on the threshold. My father stepped inside, kicking the door shut behind him with a resounding bang that made Ete jump. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. He stood there, chest puffed out, the master of his small domain. He didn't look at his wife. His hard, dark eyes were fixed solely on me, the anger in them mixed with a calculating appraisal that made my skin crawl. He switched back to Amharic, the language of my childhood, now twisted into a weapon. "You disappear for weeks, no word. You leave your duties, your family, and you return with a Ferengi, a foreigner, who looks like he wants to murder me on my own doorstep." He took a step closer, and I instinctively flinched, hating myself for the weakness. "Look at me when I speak to you," he barked. I forced myself to lift my chin, to meet his gaze. My left eye was already swelling, obscuring my vision slightly. "I was in danger, Baba. There were men, bad men who wanted to hurt me because of what I can do. Alex protected me." He waved a dismissive hand. "Danger? Pah! You are a healer. Who would hurt a healer? You ran away with a man, a rich man by the looks of him." His eyes narrowed. "Did you sleep with him? Is that why he is here, because he spoiled you?" The crudeness of it made me gasp. "Baba, how can you say that? It's not like that. He is honorable." "Honorable?" He spat on the floor. "An honorable man asks a father for permission. An honorable man negotiates a price before taking the merchandise. He is a thief. And you..." He shook his head, his expression dripping with disappointment that felt more like disgust. "You are damaged goods now. Who else will have you? If this giant of yours doesn't pay, you are worthless to me." The words hit harder than his open palm ever could. Worthless. All my life I had tried to be the dutiful daughter. I had been an obedient daughter, to bring honor to his name. I had cooked, cleaned, and kept my head down, accepting that my value was tied to who I would eventually marry. But hearing it laid bare like this, after everything I had seen, after knowing the respect and partnership of a true alpha, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet breaking of a chain. I looked at the small, angry man in front of me, the man whose approval I had craved for so long, and for the first time I didn't just see my father. I saw a bully, a small tyrant terrified of losing control. And compared to the magnificent, terrifying wolf waiting outside who held his power in check just because I asked him to, my father looked pathetic. "I am not merchandise, Baba," I said, my voice trembling slightly, but louder this time, "and I am not worthless. My gift, what I do, it matters. I matter." His eyes widened in shock. I had never talked back, not once. His face turned a darker shade of purple, and he raised his hand again. "You dare. Touch her again, and I won't stop him next time." The voice came from behind me, low and deadly calm. The door had opened silently. Alex stood in the doorway, filling the frame. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes, glowing with a faint predatory amber light, were fixed on my father's raised hand. My father froze. The air in the small hallway became electrically charged, thick with the scent of an apex predator about to strike. The illusion of his control shattered in an instant. He lowered his hand slowly, his bravado draining away to reveal the fear beneath. Alex stepped inside, the wooden floorboards creaking under his weight. He moved to my side, not touching me, but his presence was a shield, a solid wall between me and the man who had raised me. "You wanted to talk business," Alex said, his voice ice-cold, devoid of any human warmth. "Let's talk." The silence in the hallway stretched, brittle and thin, until my father cracked. He couldn't hold Alex's amber gaze. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively, and took a half-step back, gesturing weakly toward the small living room off the kitchen. The salon. We will talk in the salon." His voice was a shadow of the booming thunder it had been moments ago. He turned and shuffled away, his shoulders hunched. The king had been dethroned in his own castle without a single blow being struck. Alex didn't move immediately. He turned his head to look down at me, his expression softening just enough to let me see the concern beneath the rage. He raised a hand, his knuckles grazing the throbbing skin of my cheek. The touch was feather light, yet I flinched involuntarily. A low growl rumbled in his chest, vibrating through the small space. "I'm going to end this, Liyah. Today. Right now." "I know," I whispered. I felt unsteady, caught between the lingering terror of my father's violence and the overwhelming reality of Alex's protection. He guided me into the living room with a hand on the small of my back. It was a familiar room, worn sofas covered in patterned throws, family photos on a precarious bookshelf, the smell of incense trapped in the curtains. My father was already seated in his armchair, the one no one else was ever allowed to sit in. He looked smaller in it now, his hands gripping the armrests tightly. Alex didn't sit. He stood in the center of the room, towering over everything. His presence made the room feel claustrophobic. He pulled me to his side, tucking me against his flank. It was a possessive gesture, yes, but it was also an undeniable statement of allegiance. He was holding me up. Ete scurried in from the kitchen, placing a tray with small cups of strong dark coffee on the low table before retreating rapidly. No one reached for them. "So," my father started, clearing his throat, trying desperately to regain some semblance of authority. He switched back to English, his accent thick with nervousness. "You are a man of means, yes? You understand that a daughter is an investment. I have raised her well. She is educated. She has the gift. She will make a fine wife for a rich man." I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea rolling through my gut. He was listing my attributes like he was selling a goat at the market. He didn't see me. He had never seen me. Only what I could do for him, the status I could bring, the money I could command. "Cut the shit," Alex said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was hard as granite. "I'm not here to buy a used car. You put a price on her head. Name it." My father bridled slightly at the tone, his ingrained need for respect warring with his greed and fear. "It is tradition. It is respect. You take my daughter, you pay the bride price. She is worth 50,000 birr. No, 100,000, and 50 head of cattle." It was an absurd amount, a fortune for a family like ours. He was trying to gouge the rich foreigner, grasping for as much as he thought he could get away with. I felt Alex shift beside me. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a sleek black checkbook and a pen. The scratching of the pen on paper was the only sound in the room for several agonizing seconds. He ripped the check out with a sharp zip and tossed it onto the coffee table. It fluttered and landed face up near the untouched coffee cups. My father leaned forward, his eyes squinting to read the numbers, his breath hitched visibly. That is, he stammered, looking up at Alex with wide, disbelief-filled eyes. It was likely double what he had asked for, converted into US dollars, a life-changing amount of money. That is not a bride price, Alex said, his voice cold, precise, and terrifying. Because you don't own her. You never did. He took a step closer to the armchair, leaning down so his face was level with my father's. The predatory golden light in his eyes flared brighter. That is severance pay, Alex hissed. That is the price of you never, ever saying her name again. You don't call her. You don't look for her. If other foreigners come sniffing around, you tell them she's dead to you. Do you understand? My father was trembling now, eyeing the check like it was a venomous snake he desperately wanted to pick up. But she is my daughter. She was your daughter when you slapped her, Alex snarled, his restraint fraying at the edges. She was your daughter when you called her worthless. No, you forfeited that right. He straightened up, towering over the small man once more. Take the money, fix your roof, buy your cattle, and forget you ever had a daughter named Liyah. Because if I ever hear that you've tried to contact her, or if you ever raise a hand to her again, I won't just slap you. He let the threat hang in the air, heavier and more real than any physical blow. My father looked at the check, then at me, then back at the check. The struggle was brief. Greed won, as it always did with him. His hand shot out and snatched the piece of paper. Shh, it was done. I looked at the man in the armchair, clutching the check to his chest. He wasn't the terrifying patriarch who ruled my childhood anymore. He was just a small, greedy man who had sold his own flesh and blood. The last tendril of obligation, of desperate desire for his love, snapped within me. I felt hollowed out, but also strangely light. Goodbye, Baba, I whispered. The Amharic word for father felt foreign on my tongue now. He didn't look up. He was looking at the money. Let's go, Alex said, his arm tightening around me. He led me out of the living room, down the narrow hallway, past Ete, who was pressing herself against the kitchen wall, weeping silently. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Alex opened the front door, and we stepped out into the bright, thin air of Entoto. The sun felt different now. The dust smelled different. I was walking away from the only home I had ever known, leaving behind the debris of a family shattered by greed and fear. I leaned into Alex as we walked toward the waiting taxi. I was adrift, an orphan in everything but name, but as his arm supported me, solid and unwavering, I knew I wasn't alone. I was free. Can we make one stop? I asked, my voice hollow as the taxi rattled over the uneven road. My friend Hannah lives just 2 streets over. I need to see her. Alex nodded once, signaling the driver. He didn't ask why. He just radiated a silent, solid support that held me together. When the taxi pulled up in front of Hannah's small, blue-gated compound, he said, "I'll wait right here. I've got eyes on you." I slipped out and hurried to the gate. It was locked. The windows of the small house were shuttered tight, a sign of absence I knew too well. I knocked, then called out her name, but only silence answered. "They are gone, Liyah." I turned to see Vihib, the elderly neighbour from next door, hanging laundry on her line. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Vihib Tina Stalin," I greeted respectfully, trying to hide my desperation. "Hannah, where did they go?" Vihib shook her head, her expression sympathetic but brief. "To the village. Yesterday morning. Her grandmother's hip is acting up again. They went back to the family farm to help. They won't be back for weeks, maybe a month." My shoulders slumped. Hannah had been my lifeline here, the one person outside my family who truly knew me. Not finding her felt like the final door slamming shut on my past life in Entoto. The universe was making it very clear. There was nothing left for me here. "Thank you, Wahib," I whispered, turning away before she could see the tears prickling my eyes. I walked back to the taxi, feeling heavier with every step. Alex was on the phone, his low voice a rapid murmur of instructions. Good. Keep them secure. Tell him to sit tight and don't do anything stupid until we get back. Out. He hung up as I slid onto the worn vinyl seat beside him, closing the door against the dust. That was Adrian, he said, his eyes scanning my face, reading the fresh layer of disappointment there. I just nodded, staring straight ahead at the driver's headrest. I couldn't deal with Adrian right now. I couldn't deal with pack politics or rogue threats. I was full up on heartache. Alex didn't push. He reached over and took my hand, his large, warm fingers lacing through mine. His thumb traced soothing circles on the back of my hand, a silent tether in the storm of my emotions. We drove in silence for a few minutes, leaving the familiar, painful streets of my neighborhood behind and heading down towards the bustling heart of Addis Ababa. Finally, Alex broke the silence. His voice was rough, laced with a regret that surprised me. "Liyah, back there, with your father." He squeezed my hand tighter. "I hate that it went down like that. I hate that I had to be the one to... I hate that you had to see that. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you today." I turned to look at him. His golden eyes were dark with concern, searching mine for condemnation. He wasn't apologizing for what he did to my father. An alpha never apologizes for protecting what is his. But he was apologizing for the hurt it had caused me. "Don't be," I said, my voice quiet but steady. It had to be done. He made his choice a long time ago, when he started seeing me as currency instead of a daughter. Today just made it official. I looked down at our joined hands, at the strength in his grip. "You didn't cause the pain, Alex. You just helped me cut it out. Thank you for buying my freedom." It was a bitter truth, acknowledging that my liberty had come with a price tag, but it was the truth nonetheless. I took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the overwhelming urge to run, to hide, to be anywhere but in this reality. "Alex," I said, turning fully toward him, pleading with my eyes. "Please, just take me somewhere nice, somewhere beautiful. A hotel where the sheets are clean and the water is hot and nobody knows who I am. I just want to... I need to forget today ever happened." He didn't hesitate. He nodded, a flicker of fierce protectiveness returning to his eyes. He leaned forward, tapping the glass partition. "Driver," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Take us to the Sheraton Addis, the luxury wing." My eyes widened slightly. The Sheraton. It was a towering palace of glass and stone in the center of the city, a place I had only ever seen in magazines or driven past from a distance. It was a world of diplomats and foreign dignitaries, utterly inaccessible to a girl from Entoto. It was exactly where I needed to be. The taxi fell silent as we approached the imposing gates of the Sheraton. Security guards in crisp uniforms stepped out, their eyes scanning the vehicle before waving us through with a deferential salute. We glided up long, palm-lined driveway, the noise and dust of the city instantly replaced by an almost unnatural quiet. The car stopped under the massive porte-cochere. Before the driver could even move, a doorman in a livery that looked more expensive than my father's entire wardrobe had pulled open my door. "Welcome to the Sheraton Addis, madam," he murmured, bowing slightly. I stepped out onto polished marble that gleamed under the recessed lighting. The air here was different, cooler, scented with jasmine and something crisp and expensive. I felt painfully aware of my dusty shoes and the tear-stained clothes I'd been wearing since dawn. I felt like an intruder, a street cat sneaking into a palace. Alex emerged from the other side, dropping a stack of burr onto the passenger seat that made the driver's eyes bug out. He didn't wait for thanks. He rounded the car in 2 long strides and wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me tight against his side. His heat was a furnace against the sudden chill of the air conditioning. "Head up, Liyah," he murmured into my hair, his voice a low vibration meant only for me. "You belong here anywhere I am." He led me through the towering glass doors into a lobby that was breathtaking in its scale. It was a cavern of polished stone, soaring ceilings, and massive floral arrangements that must have cost a fortune. People milled about in expensive suits and designer dresses, their voices hushed. Alex ignored them all. He walked straight to the reception desk, his presence parting the few people in his path like the Red Sea. The young woman behind the desk looked up, her professional smile faltering for a fraction of a second as she took in Alex's size and the predatory intensity in his eyes, before landing on me with a flicker of curiosity. "We need a suite," Alex said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Top floor, best view you have, and we need it now." "Of course, sir. Do you have a reservation?" He didn't answer. He just slapped a heavy black credit card onto the marble counter. It made a sharp clack that echoed slightly in the quiet space. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly as she looked at the card. Her typing speed increased dramatically. "Ah, yes, sir. We have the Royal Suite available immediately on the top floor. It offers a panoramic view of the city and the mountains." "Fine," Alex grunted. "Send up a change of clothes for both of us. Something comfortable. And a menu." "Certainly. And your luggage, sir?" "We have none." She blinked once, then nodded smoothly. "Very good, sir. Right this way." She signalled a bellman who led us to a bank of gleaming brass elevators. The ride up was swift and silent, the glass wall of the elevator revealing the sprawling city of Addis Ababa sinking away below us. I watched the rooftops shrink, the cars turning into ants. Up here, the chaos of my life felt distant, almost manageable. The elevator opened directly onto a private foyer on the top floor. The bellman opened a set of double mahogany doors and stepped aside. "The Royal Suite, sir." Alex ushered me inside, tipping the man and dismissing him with a nod. The heavy doors clicked shut, sealing us into a world of profound silence. I stood frozen in the entryway. The suite was bigger than my father's entire house. A massive living area with plush cream sofas faced a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond them, the city twinkled as dusk began to fall, a vast sea of lights that looked beautiful from this height, hiding the dirt and the pain down below. There was a dining area with a long polished table, a kitchen, and doors leading off to what I assumed were bedrooms and bathrooms. Everything was immaculate, luxurious, and completely impersonal. It was exactly what I had asked for. A blank slate. "Liyah." Alex's voice was gentle now. He came up behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders, his thumbs kneading the tight muscles there. "Breathe," he instructed softly. I did. I took a deep, shaky breath, inhaling the scent of expensive leather and clean air, mixing with the wood smoke and musk that was uniquely Alex. "Go sit down," he said, guiding me toward one of the massive sofas. "I'm going to order us enough food to feed an army, and then I'm going to run you a bath that's hotter than the hinges of hell. You're not going to think about anything for the rest of the night except washing this day off your skin." I nodded mutely, sinking into the soft cushions. They seemed to swallow me whole. I watched Alex move around the suite, turning on lamps that cast a warm, golden glow, picking up the phone to bark orders for room service. He was a force of nature, tamed and focused entirely on my comfort. As I sat there, high above the city that had birthed me and then tried to break me, I finally let the tears come. They weren't angry tears or scared tears. They were just tired tears. The tears of someone who had been running for a very long time and had finally been allowed to stop. A silver cart, laden with enough food to feed a small village, arrived moments later. The smell of spicy Doro Wat, rich, buttery kitpho and fresh injera filled the suite, momentarily overriding the scent of luxury. We sat at the polished dining table and ate in silence, the only sounds the clinking of silver against fine china. I pushed the food around my plate, the knot in my stomach making it hard to swallow, while Alex ate with the efficient, focused energy of a predator refueling after a hunt. When the silence became too loud, I broke it. "He wasn't always like that, you know," I said softly, staring down at my plate. "My father." Alex stopped eating, setting his fork down slowly. He didn't speak, just waited for me to continue. "Before my mother died, the house was different. It was loud. There was music and neighbours always dropping by for coffee. He used to laugh, a real laugh that shook his whole belly." I traced the gold rim of the plate with my finger. Then she got pregnant with my brother. There were complications. They both died during the birth. The memory was an old, dull ache now, worn smooth by time. After that, the music stopped. The neighbours stopped coming. He started drinking to fill the silence. The debt started piling up. He looked at me, and I think sometimes he saw her, and he hated me for being alive when she wasn't. Other times he just saw another mouth to feed. I looked up at Alex. The violence, that started later, when I was 16. He brought home a man, a merchant 3 times my age, and told me I was getting married. I refused. I told him I wanted to finish school. That was the first time he hit me. He said I was an ungrateful asset, that my only value was in who I belonged to. A dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. It felt jagged in my throat. He must be the happiest man in Entoto tonight. He finally got what he ever wanted. You think you paid for my freedom, Alex, but in his mind, that check was just the highest bride price anyone has ever paid in Ethiopia. He thinks he won. Alex was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It was intense, searching, and strangely soft around the edges. "What?" I asked, self-conscious under his scrutiny. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "You just told me he beat you, tried to sell you off, and treated you like cattle," Alex said, his voice low and rough. "And yet, when you talk about before, your voice changes. You still talk about that version of him with love." I looked away toward the dark window. Because he was a good father once, before the grief broke him. It doesn't excuse what he became, but I mourn the man I lost years ago, not just the one we left today. The weight of the conversation was suddenly too much. I scraped my chair back. I need that bath now. I retreated into the cavernous bathroom, locking the door behind me. The tub was massive, already filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender and expensive oils. I stripped off my dusty clothes, leaving them in a heap on the marble floor, and sank into the heat. I closed my eyes, letting the water lap against my chin. I wished it could wash away the confusion inside my head as easily as it washed the dust from my skin. How had I gotten here? I know one girl from Entoto now holed up in a presidential suite with a rich alpha werewolf, and not just one, 2. My mind drifted to Adrian, his haunted blue eyes, the way he flinched from contact as if his own skin was poison. My heart ached for him with a tenderness that frightened me. I wanted to touch him, to use my gift to pull the guilt from his soul the way I'd pulled the destructive energy from his body in the woods. I felt a pull toward him, a need to heal the broken parts of him that mirrored the broken parts of me. Then there was Alex, the man outside that door. He was a mountain, solid, immovable, terrifying in his intensity. With him, I didn't feel the need to heal. I felt the need to be held. He was safety. He was the fire that burned away the shadows my father cast. He demanded nothing from me but my presence, yet gave everything to protect me. It was madness. I was in love with 2 brothers, 2 alphas. Who did that? It was against nature, against every story I'd ever heard. I shouldn't want both of them. I should choose. But the thought of losing Adrian's fragile vulnerability felt like tearing out a piece of my heart, and the thought of walking away from Alex's fierce protection felt like stepping off a cliff. "Liyah?" Alex's voice came through the thick door, low and muffled but laced with concern. "You doing okay in there? You've been quiet for a long time." His voice grounded me, pulling me back from the spiral of my thoughts. "I'm fine," I called back, my voice sounding stronger than I felt. "Just soaking. I'll be out in a minute." I drained the tub and stepped out, wrapping myself in a plush white bathrobe that was 3 sizes too big. I stood before the steamed-up mirror, wiping a circle clear with my hand. The woman staring back looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed, but there was a set to her jaw that hadn't been there this morning. My heart gave a painful squeeze, not for my father, not for Hannah, but for the man waiting in the other room. The man who had shouldered my burdens today without hesitation, who had used his power and his wealth to build a fortress around me, even when I pushed him away. my protector. I took a deep breath and opened the bathroom door. The bedroom was dimly lit. Alex was standing by the massive window, looking out at the city lights. He turned as I entered. His hair was damp, darker now, suggesting he'd used the second bathroom to shower. He was wearing a plain grey t-shirt and sweatpants that must have been brought up by the hotel. They were ridiculously tight across his broad shoulders and thick thighs, straining at the seams. A small, genuine smile touched my lips for the first time that day. He caught the look and glanced down at himself, tugging self-consciously at the hem of the shirt. Yeah, I know. I look like a sausage in a casing. I ordered some actual clothes for tomorrow. He looked at me, his gaze travelling from my damp hair down to the oversized robe, his expression softening into something painfully gentle. He gestured toward a second door on the far side of the room. There's another bedroom through there. I had them make up the bed. I figured you'd want space tonight to process everything. He started to move toward the door. I'll just head in. No. The word was abrupt, almost sharp in the quiet room. He stopped, turning back to me with a questioning look. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't want space. I didn't want to process. I was done with being alone with my thoughts. I needed an anchor. I needed heat. I needed to feel alive after a day steeped in the ashes of my past. My hands went to the belt of the robe. My fingers trembled slightly as I untied the knot. I let the heavy fabric fall open, pooling at my feet on the thick carpet. I stood before him, naked and vulnerable, stripping away the last barrier between us. "Don't go anywhere, Alex," I whispered, my voice shaking with a different kind of fear now, a fear mixed with desperate need. "Stay with me." Time seemed to warp, thickening around us like amber. Alex didn't move, didn't breathe for a horrifying second. Then his chest expanded on a ragged inhale that sounded almost painful. His eyes, those intense, predatory amber eyes, began a slow, deliberate descent. They felt like a physical touch, heavy and scorching, tracing the line of my throat, the curve of my breasts, the dip of my waist, and the flare of my hips. He didn't rush. He mapped me, consuming every inch of bare skin exposed to the dim light. I felt my nipples harden under his gaze, a flush rising from my chest to my hairline. His look was raw, possessive, a starving man presented with a feast he hadn't dared to hope for. The air between us crackled, heavy with his sudden, immense arousal. When his eyes finally lifted back to mine, they were dark, almost black, burning with a fire that threatened to consume me. "Liyah." His voice was a wrecked growl, rougher than I'd ever heard it. "Do you know what you're asking? Are you sure?" I didn't trust my voice. I just nodded, a single jerky movement. He took a half step forward, then stopped, his hands clenching into fists at his sides, as if physically restraining himself. "I don't want to rush you. I don't want to take something you're not ready to give because you're hurt or scared tonight." My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my resolve didn't waver. I needed this connection. I needed to be claimed by the fire in his eyes. I took the first step, then another. The plush carpet felt strange beneath my bare feet as I closed the distance between us. I stopped inches from him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his massive frame, close enough to smell the intoxicating mix of soap, wood smoke, and the sharp, musky tang of his desire. I looked up into his tortured face. "I'm not scared, Alex, and I'm not rushing. I want you. I'm more than ready." A shudder ran through his entire body. It was as if my words snapped the last thin tether of his control. A low, guttural sound tore from his throat. Before I could blink, his hands were on my waist, big, hot, and calloused. He didn't grab. He claimed. He leaned down, and I braced myself for an onslaught, but his lips brushed mine in a kiss that was devastatingly soft. It was a question, a promise, a gentle tasting that made my knees weak. He pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against mine, his breath hot on my face. Then, without warning, he swept me off my feet. I gasped, instinctively wrapping my arms around his thick neck as he lifted me high against his chest, as easily as if I weighed nothing. He carried me a few feet to the massive bed and laid me down in the centre of the cool, high thread count sheets. He didn't immediately climb over me. Instead, he knelt at the edge of the mattress, his eyes never leaving mine as his hands began a slow, worshipful journey over my body. "You are so beautiful, Liyah," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Perfect." He leaned over, his mouth replacing his hands. He kissed the pulse fluttering wildly in my throat, then moved lower to the sensitive skin of my collarbone. I arched my back involuntarily as his hot, wet tongue traced the swell of my breast. He took one nipple into his mouth, suckling gently at first, then harder, his stubble grazing my tender skin, sending jolts of electricity straight to my groin. His large hand moved down my flat stomach, fingers trailing fire until they reached the curls between my legs. He didn't dive in. He teased, his fingers dancing along the sensitive creases of my thighs, brushing against my slick, swollen folds until I was whimpering, my hips bucking instinctively to meet his touch. Finally, his fingers found the little nub at the centre of my heat. He began to rub it, softly at first, then with a firm, rhythmic pressure that made my breath catch in my throat. He knew exactly what he was doing. He played me like an instrument, building the tension higher and higher until a deep, unfamiliar ache settled low in my belly, a yearning, empty feeling that demanded to be filled. "Please, Alex," I choked out, my head thrashing against the pillows. "Please." He stopped immediately, pulling his hand away. The sudden absence of his touch was agonizing. "Not yet, little healer," he growled, his voice strained. "I need to be inside you." He stood up by the side of the bed, his eyes locked on my flushed, panting form. With jerky, impatient movements, he ripped the tight t-shirt over his head, revealing an expanse of bronze, muscular chest shadowed with dark hair. He shoved the sweatpants down his hips, kicking them free. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't help it. My eyes were drawn down. He was magnificent and terrifying. His erection sprang free, thick and incredibly long, pulsing with blood. It was dark, veined, with a broad, velvety head that glistened with moisture. The scent of him, raw, primal, unadulterated male musk, hit me fiercely, filling my senses. A cold spike of genuine fear pierced through the haze of my arousal. It looked impossibly large. How could that fit inside me without tearing me apart? "Okay," I breathed, the word barely audible. "Now I'm kinda scared." Alex let out a rough, breathless chuckle. He saw the wide-eyed apprehension on my face. "Good," he murmured, a wicked glint in his eyes. "You should be a little scared of what I'm about to do to you." He climbed onto the bed, his massive body hovering over mine, caging me in with his powerful arms. The heat coming off him was immense. He lowered his head and kissed me again, harder this time, his tongue sweeping into my mouth, tasting my fear and my desire. He pulled back, his face inches from mine, his expression deadly serious. "Last chance, Liyah. You can still say no. If you're not sure, tell me now and I'll stop. I swear it." I looked into his eyes, seeing the fierce restraint battling with his overwhelming need. I was scared, yes, but the need to be his, wholly and completely, was stronger. "I'm sure, Alex," I whispered, lifting my hips slightly to brush against him. "I'm ready. Take me." He let out a shuddering breath and settled his weight between my legs, nudging my thighs wider apart with his knees. "It's going to hurt at first, sweetheart," he said, his voice laced with regret and anticipation. He guided the blunt, hot head of his bulge to my slick entrance. "I'm too big, and you're too tight. I need you to breathe for me, in and out, focus on my eyes." I nodded, gripping his biceps, my knuckles turning white. I fixed my gaze on his amber eyes, inhaling shakily. He began to push. It was a slow, relentless invasion. I felt my body stretching, opening in ways it never had before. A sharp, burning sting flared as he pushed past my maidenhead, and I couldn't hold back a cry of pain, my body instinctively tensing against him. Alex stopped instantly, freezing in place, embedded only an inch or two inside me. His face was a mask of strained concentration, sweat beading on his brow as he fought his own instinct to thrust deep. "Breathe, Liyah," he commanded softly, brushing the hair back from my damp forehead. "Don't fight it. Let me in." I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing on his voice, forcing myself to exhale slowly. As my muscles relaxed slightly, he began to move again, millimetre by agonizing millimetre, sinking deeper into my tight heat. The burning faded to a dull throb, replaced by an overwhelming sensation of fullness. He was stretching me to my absolute limit, filling every empty space inside me until I felt completely occupied by him. When he was finally seated to the hilt, his pelvic bone resting against mine, he let out a groan that vibrated through my entire body. He held still, giving my body time to adjust to his incredible size, his heart hammering against my chest like a trapped bird. We were connected, fused together, and in that moment, despite the lingering pain, I had never felt more complete. For a long moment, we just lay there, locked together. The only sounds in the room were our harsh, ragged breaths. I could feel the blood pulsing in his erection inside me, a strange and powerful sensation. The initial sting of entry was fading, replaced by a deep, throbbing ache of fullness that was both uncomfortable and incredibly arousing. Alex was trembling above me, the muscles in his arms bunched and rock-hard as he held his weight off me. His eyes were closed, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. I could tell he was fighting a colossal battle for control, every instinct screaming at him to move, to claim. I reached up and cupped his jaw, my fingers sliding into the short hair at his nape. "Alex," I whispered, the name feeling new and heavy on my tongue. "I'm okay. You can move." His eyes snapped open, burning into mine. "Are you sure? The pain—" "It's okay," I assured him, shifting my hips slightly beneath him. The movement sent a jolt of electricity through both of us, and his breath hitched. "I need to feel you." He let out a low, guttural groan and pulled back almost completely until only the very tip of him was inside me. The feeling of emptiness was sudden and sharp. Then, with a slow, deliberate thrust, he pushed back in, filling me completely once more. My head fell back against the pillows, a soft gasp escaping my lips. It didn't hurt anymore. It was just intense, overwhelming. He began to set a rhythm, slow and deep at first. Each thrust was a calculated invasion, stretching me, filling me, claiming a little more of me with each pass. He wasn't just having sex with me, he was imprinting himself onto my very soul. My body, initially tense, began to soften and respond. The ache of fullness transformed into a simmering heat that spread outwards from where we were joined. I found myself moving with him, my hips rising to meet his thrusts, a primal instinct taking over. Alex noticed the change. His rhythm sped up, his thrusts becoming harder, faster. The slow, deliberate movements gave way to a more urgent, driving pace. His hands gripped my waist, holding me still as he pounded into me, his groans becoming deeper, more animalistic. The friction was incredible. Every nerve ending in my body was on fire. The simmering heat turned into a rolling boil, concentrating low in my belly, right where he was hitting a sweet, sensitive spot deep inside me with every thrust. "Alex," I whimpered, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. I clutched at his shoulders, my nails digging into his skin. "Alex, please, something's happening." "I know, baby," he rasped, his sweat dripping onto my chest. "Let it happen. Come for me." He increased his pace again, his thrusts becoming hard and fast and almost desperate. The pleasure built rapidly, a coil tightening and tightening in my core. It was too much, too intense. I couldn't catch my breath. My vision blurred, the room narrowing down to the sensation of him moving inside me and the fire spreading through my veins. And then I shattered. A wave of pure, undiluted pleasure crashed over me, starting in my groin and radiating outwards to every corner of my body. I cried out his name, my body bowing off the mattress, every muscle tensing as the orgasm ripped through me. My inner walls clamped down around his cock, pulsing violently. The feeling of me spasming around him was his undoing. With a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the room, Alex drove into me one last time, burying himself as deep as he could go. His body went rigid, his back arching as he emptied himself inside me, his warm flows flooding my womb in pulsing spurts. We stayed like that for a long time, collapsed against each other, our bodies slick with sweat, our hearts pounding in unison. He was heavy on me, but I didn't want him to move. I loved the weight of him, the feeling of being completely enveloped by his presence. Eventually his breathing started to slow. He lifted his head, his face buried in the crook of my neck, and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my damp skin. "Liyah," he murmured into my hair, his voice raw and filled with an emotion I was too exhausted to decipher. "My Liyah." He carefully withdrew from me, a small sound of protest escaping my lips at the loss of connection. He rolled to my side and immediately pulled me against him, wrapping his massive arms around me and tucking my head under his chin. "Go to sleep, little healer," he whispered, his hand stroking my back in slow, soothing circles. "I've got you. You're safe." Exhaustion crashed down on me like a physical weight. Nestled in the protective circle of his arms, surrounded by his scent, I finally let go. The darkness of sleep claimed me, dreamless and deep. The blissful darkness of sleep was shattered not by a noise, but by a sensation. A sharp, white-hot spike of pain lanced through my left shoulder, right where my healer's mark was. I jolted upright with a strangled cry, my hand flying to the source of the agony. It wasn't a dull ache. It was a violent, throbbing pulse, as if something alive was trying to claw its way out from under my skin. I crouched low on the bed, gasping for air, the sudden movement sending a dull, contrasting throb through the soreness between my legs, a stark reminder of the passion just hours before. "Alex," I choked out, my voice raw. I turned, expecting to see his sleeping form, to feel his comforting hand. The other side of the great bed was empty. The sheets were rumpled and cold. Panic, sharp and sudden, pierced through the haze of pain. Ignoring the stiffness in my body, I scrambled off the bed, my legs unsteady. The pulsing in my shoulder intensified with every heartbeat, a rhythmic torture. I stumbled towards the bathroom, the bright light searing my eyes as I flipped the switch. I gasped at the reflection in the mirror. My mark, the intricate swirl I'd known my whole life, was unrecognizable. It was swollen, angry, and pulsing with a sickening rhythm. Worse, thick black veins were spiderwebbing out from it, creeping across my pale skin like venomous ink. I crouched against the vanity, teeth gritted, as another wave of pain washed over me. It felt like a hammer striking a bruise over and over again, each pulse sending shockwaves of nausea through my gut. "What is happening?" My mind raced, trying to find a healer's explanation, but finding only terror. Why is it black? Why does it hurt like this? And where was Alex? The silence of the suite suddenly felt heavy, menacing. He wouldn't just leave. Not after. Not now. The mark gave another violent throb, a clear, undeniable pull. It was calling me. It wanted me to go somewhere. I couldn't stay here. I needed to find Alex. I needed to stop this pain. I forced myself to move. On the small sofa were neatly laid out a pair of black shorts and a t-shirt. I grabbed them, my hands shaking so badly I could barely pull them on. I did a frantic sweep of the suite, the living area, the kitchen, the second bathroom. "Alex! Alex, where are you?" My voice rose in panic, bouncing off the empty walls. Nothing. He was gone. The pull in my shoulder became a physical force, dragging me towards the door. I didn't have a choice. I had to follow it. I opened the heavy suite door and stepped out into the opulent, silent hallway of the hotel. The pull led me straight, past the elevators, towards the heavy exit door at the far end of the corridor. I reached it, my hand hovering over the push bar. The mark gave a violent, agonizing throb, the strongest yet, as if to say, "Yes, here." I pushed. Before the door could open more than a crack, a hand shot out from the shadows, clamping onto my wrist with a grip like iron ice. I spun around, a scream trapped in my throat. The man standing there was impossibly pale, his skin like polished marble in the dim light. He was dressed in an impeccable dark suit, but it was his face that froze the blood in my veins. His eyes were a vivid, unnatural crimson, glowing with a predatory hunger, and when he smiled, his lips peeled back to reveal razor-sharp fangs that glistened in the light. "Got you," he purred, his voice smooth as velvet and cold as a grave. "Hello, healer. Nice meeting you." My heart slammed against my ribs. Every instinct I had screamed, "Run!" But his grip was unyielding, and the sheer aura of ancient power radiating from him pinned me in place. A vampire. Alex. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This monster must have taken him. That's why he wasn't in the room. I forced the scream down, forced my trembling body to still. Panic would kill me. I needed answers. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "Where is Alex?" The vampire's smile widened, a terrifying sight. "Your mate is very safe," he said, the words dripping with mockery. "For now, but that will differ with your decision." A cold dread washed over me. My decision? What do you mean? What do you want? His smile faded, replaced by a look of chilling seriousness. His fangs seemed to lengthen, glistening in the shadows. "There's someone that would want to meet you, little healer." "Who?" I whispered, my throat dry. "A person who knows you well," he said, his crimson eyes boring into mine. "Someone who has been watching you grow." He leaned closer, his gaze intensifying until it was the only thing I could see. The red of his eyes seemed to swirl, to expand, pulling me in. "Sleep," he commanded, his voice echoing in my skull. My vision went black, the world tilted violently, and then nothingness. I opened my eyes to a different kind of silence. I was sitting in a high-backed chair in a room I didn't recognize. It was dark, panelled in rich wood, with heavy curtains drawn against any outside light. Sitting across from me in a matching chair was a man. He was older, much older than Alpha Mike, with silver hair that was perfectly coiffed, and a face that, despite its age, held a terrifying, ageless power. He was dressed in a suit that looked more expensive than anything I'd ever seen. He was watching me with eyes that were a startling, familiar shade of amber. My breath caught in my throat. I knew those eyes. I'd seen them on Alex. I'd seen them on Adrian. The realization hit me like a physical blow, draining the blood from my face. The man smiled, a cold, calculating expression that didn't reach his eyes. "It's nice meeting you face to face," he said, his voice a low, smooth rumble that sent shivers down my spine. "Daughter-in-law."
A chance to say, never spoke our truth, held back by pride, our hearts uncouth. The chance we missed, the night we met, now shadows linger with regret. Your eyes, they told 1,000 tales. The silence built these prison walls, unwritten letters lost in time, the echoes of our love gone blind. Unspoken words, they haunt our dreams, whispers of what might have been, silent cries lost in the wind, unspoken words, they cut within. A chance to speak was all we needed, but fear took hold, our hearts conceded, fading slow like distant stars, leaving behind these silent